أجمعين وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave a general command that if a person knows this, they do not have to specifically know every detail of what is haram in order to pretty much hit the mark. And this is a group of narrations that are referred to as Jawami' al-Kalim. The scholars of Islam have referred to them as very concise in their wording, yet very expansive in their meaning. It's referred to as Jawami' al-Kalim. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells us in a narration collected by Imam al-Hafiz Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahimahullah fi Musnadih, that one of the things that he was given that no other prophet or messenger was given before him was وَأُوتِيتُ جَوَامِعَ الْكَلِمِ. And I was given Jawami' al-Kalim. I was given a revelation from Allah that was very concise in its wording, yet very expansive in its meaning. And this is very critical for this ummah. Why? Because one of the descriptions that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was given of his ummah was that their books, your followers, their book will be in their hearts, in their chests. It will not be something that they rely on paper. Paper and writing and literacy with regards to the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that is actually a second layer of security. The primary source of preservation for the Quran and Sunnah are the scholars of Islam and the institutional memory of the scholarship of Islam. Writing things down, this is actually secondary, and that is something specific to this ummah. And being that this ummah will be a nation of memorization, it was critical that this ummah's revelation be concise in its words. Yet also, all of the pertinent meanings of previous revelations would be found in the generalities of the Quran and the Sunnah. And that is why the Quran will actually be used to testify against and for all of the other nations. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا لِتَكُونُوا شُهَدَاءَ عَلَى النَّاسِ وَيَكُونَ الرَّسُولُ عَلَيْكُمْ شَهِيدًا. That we have made you all a just nation in order that you may be testify and your testimony be honored against all other people. And as the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned, that when the prophets and messengers are brought to testify for or against their own nations, that the Quran and its people will be summoned as to testify for or against along with those prophets and messengers. And this is why this nation will be the first nation to enter paradise, even though it was the last nation to be sent. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that we are the last nation sequentially and the first on the day of judgment, meaning to enter paradise. We're the first nation to be judged. We're the first nation to be entered into paradise. All other nations will enter behind the nation of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is a great honor. And so it became absolutely critical that our book, the Quran, and our Prophet's legacy, the Sunnah, be concise in its actual words. yet expansive and general enough to be able to include all people of all time for the remainder of humanity's existence. Subhanallah. And this is something that oftentimes we take for granted as Muslims, that we pick up the Quran and we expect the Quran is speaking directly to us individually. That is not a small feat. That in itself is incredibly miraculous, because the Quran is general enough to be able to address all places and all times, but it's specific enough to give you or I at the end of time, all the way in America in the middle of the desert, specific guidance on how to conduct yourself. It's applying to me, yet it applies to everyone in every place and every time. It comes to a culture, it brings out the best and magnifies it, and it snuffs out the worst and abolishes it. And it does it with incredible precision, like a scalpel. This is something that oftentimes we take for granted, and this is no small feat. And this is one of the reasons why the other nations, the Christians, the Jews, one of the reasons why they are unable today to follow the literal word of their revelations, because their revelations were not meant for all places and times. It wasn't meant for all nations. They're trying to apply something that is outdated and something that has been abrogated. And so, because of this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the words of the Quran concise, made the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam sunnah concise, so that it is concise enough for us to be able to memorize, to learn, to preserve in our hearts and our minds and in our actions as an ummah. Imagine this, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala referred to the Quran as Al-Kitab. It is the book. What is the book? The book meaning the gist of the revelation of Allah to humanity, from the time of Adam all the way until Allah inherits that which is on the earth, and the earth itself and that which is upon it. So he referred to the Quran as the book. This is all of Allah's revelation, meaning that everything pertinent or relevant of any revelation that came from the time that Allah spoke to Adam alayhi salam all the way until the time of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, if it is relevant, it's found in the Quran and it's found in the Sunnah. And it's mentioned that all of the revelations of Allah, the meanings of those revelations, when we say revelations, we're speaking about the books. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Hadid, لَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رُسُلَنَا بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ وَأَنزَلْنَا مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْمِيزَانَ. That indeed we have sent our messengers bearing miracles, and we have sent with each of them the book and the scales of justice and proper logic. And so every messenger has a book, every one. We know of 5 of them, or 6, difference of opinion amongst the scholars, right? We know of At-Tawrah, wal-Injil, wal-Zabur, the Suhuf of Ibrahim, and the Suhuf of Musa, for those of the scholars who mention that the slates of Moses are different than the Torah. Some say they're the same, some say they're the others. And the Quran. These are the named books that we know of. But every messenger had a book, every one. And in the narration of Abi Dharr, in Musnad al-Imam Ahmad, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was asked how many messengers have been sent to humanity. And he said 315, Jamman Ghafira. 315 messengers were sent to 70 chief nations from the time of Adam until the time of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now the gist of those 315 books is found in those 5 books that Allah mentioned in the Quran. Torah, wal-Injil, wal-Zabur, wal-Suhuf, right? And the gist of those is found in the Torah and the Injil. And the gist of all that is in the Torah wal-Injil is found in the mutashabihat of the Quran. And the gist of all that is in the mutashabihat is found in the muhkam of the Quran, the clear, the explicit verses of the Quran. And all of the meanings and the gist of the explicit verses of the Quran are found in Surah Al-Fatiha. And the gist of the meanings of Surah Al-Fatiha are found in the verse, Iyyaka na'bud wa Iyyaka Nastaeen. You alone do we worship, the first verse, the 4th verse, and you alone do we beseech in aid. So what do we understand from this? We understand that every single verse of the Quran is to be understood through the lens of Iyyaka na'bud wa Iyyaka Nastaeen. Every verse of the Quran is to be understood through the lens of Surah Al-Fatiha. And if you try to understand it without looking through the lens of Surah Al-Fatiha, you will grossly misunderstand the Quran. Because the Quran is so concise, and because it is so broad in meaning, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has entrusted the scholars of Islam, and He has brought up from every generation a scholarship that will carry on these meanings and pass them on to the next generation, the words and the meanings. And this is why precision is so important. Sometimes when we look at the general, the layman, the regular Muslim, they say, bid'ah, sunnah, what's the big deal? It's not that big an issue. You guys are splitting hairs, right? What's important is that you're good. No. Imagine if this attitude was carried by the companions, radiyallahu anhum. Yeah, it's not a big deal. He's potato, as long as your heart's in the right. What would happen to Islam? Would it have ever reached us? Absolutely not. It would have been corrupted and perverted grossly before even the next generation would have had a chance to receive it. And that is a testament to the prophethood of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That Allah promised that this revelation would be protected and preserved, and that today we could not be more different in our culture and ways than that of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, yet somehow his words have reached us as if he just spoke them. The Quran has reached us as if it was just revealed yesterday. And this is a testament to the trustworthiness of our scholarship and the legacy of the scholarship of Islam. Our scholars are not like the scholars of the other religions. We don't have a hidden epidemic of pedophilia in our scholarship. We don't have incredible monetary corruption in our scholarship. We don't have that. There may be a bad apple here and there, and that's something that is part of the human condition. But that is not emblematic of all of the scholars of Islam. The scholars of Islam are the best of mankind after the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the tabi'een and tabi'it tabi'een. They are the best of us. They are the brightest minds. They are the most brave, the most courageous, the most knowledgeable, the most wise amongst us. And when we stand behind them, we advance. And when we get in front of them and challenge them, historically we have always failed. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين وجزاكم الله خيرا.